Welcome to Tea Time with Talent Acquisition, the podcast aimed at sharing knowledge and fostering stories within the vibrant talent acquisition community. There's no surefire way to accomplish anything in life, but with each conversation, we aim to delve into diverse topics and present fresh perspectives to empower you, our fellow colleague, on your own journey to success. I'm your host, Eden, and for the next hour or so, I'm going to be joined by a highly experienced talent acquisition expert who over the past decade has helped to sustainably scale a number of startups across the Berlin ecosystem, from Wooga and EyeEm to Latana and now his current company. This individual has helped create processes, structures, working environments where creativity fueled their hiring. As someone I've actually worked alongside in a former team, it's a great pleasure to have him on today's podcast. So when you're ready, grab your favorite tea or coffee, if you prefer, and welcome me and join today's guest, the Talent Acquisition Manager at Pitch, Andreas Bundi. So thanks so much for joining.
Thanks a lot for having me, and thanks for the intro. I kind of was worried I'd have to summarize my decade in Berlin, in the Berlin tech scene myself, but you've already done that for me. So yeah,
that's what LinkedIn's for.
Yeah.
That's one of the perks of having that aspect of LinkedIn.
Yeah.
But I really appreciate you joining on this one. The topic we're gonna cover today is one that, I mentioned it before we started recording. I'm so excited to have this one because I think it's going to touch so many people's kind of interests. We'll get into that part in a minute, but before we do so, I do like to start every episode off with the same question. So everyone's got a level playing field. What is one thing that you believe everyone in talent acquisition is doing today, but you feel it could be improved upon?
That's a great question. I think, everybody focuses on the top level KPIs, time to hire, looking just very deeply at the funnel. And I think that this is really broad, but I think this focus, and this is not just a phenomenon in talent acquisition, but in every domain these days, this over focus on data, it can be detrimental. There's some things you just can't measure. And I think two of those would be, well, one is the topic of today's discussion, employer branding, and kind of like the softer part of talent acquisition. It's unless you're doing brand awareness surveys, which I've worked at a company that actually focused on building these. Even those are imperfect, I would argue. It's hard to really judge or gauge the impact of employer branding. So that's why people don't focus on it, because of this, it being kind of difficult to measure. And then the second, I would say, is candidate experience. Now there's like a little bit more of a trend I'm seeing. People, candidates are more vocal, I think, than they used to be about their experiences, which is a great thing. And I think that's put more, there's more platforms for them to share it than there used to be, these kinds of experience, Glassdoor and LinkedIn. That's kind of put a little bit more pressure. I think it's a little bit overdue, more pressure on talent acquisition people to put more thought into like the perspective of the candidate, treat them, I think, with a little bit more respect. I would say it's two broad areas, but I think, this job is one where you're just constantly under pressure, and the numbers are the easiest way to kind of demonstrate your impact, and they do work in certain, and I think they're important, but I think those softer elements of the job still, if you're thrown into a chaotic environment and you've got a million things to do, you've got 50 jobs to fill, they just get kind of a little bit neglected, those softer elements. And I think ultimately that's to the detriment of the profession, because reputational sort of consequences, and ultimately it's going to be harder for you to do the nitty gritty of your job, the day to day, if you don't kind of take care of the softer elements as well.
I think the topic of employer branding, obviously, we're going to speak about today, so we'll circle back to that. But just to kind of put my element into and experience, it's definitely a topic that a lot of people have been listening to on the podcast. We've covered it a few times already, and there's so much still to cover. I actually wrote a post about this a couple of weeks back. I hope is rather the better phrase, where so many talent acquisition professionals have been let go, and they're in the firefight of finding a job right now, and they're feeling it. They know what bad experiences look like, because candidates are getting ghosted, companies are just closing roles, making offers, pulling them.
Mm-hmm.
I'm hoping that the people that are in the positions of 2024, 2025, they remember what it felt like in 2023
Mm-hmm.
to kind of go through that process and what that experience felt like for them, so we don't remake the same mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
I think we will get there. I think this is probably the first time in a very long time, or certainly in my career, where so many talent teams have been, sorry, not talent teams, but how many talent individuals have been looking and experiencing bad processes. So I think this is going to make a sizable shift
Mm.
in that actual experience.
Yeah.
That's the hope. But
Yeah,
let's check back in
absolutely.
a couple of years' time and see was the prediction right.
Yeah, I'd actually, yeah, it's so, you get so stuck into something, like being on the one side of the recruitment process. I think it gradually kind of like wears away your empathy and like your ability to kind of like see it from the other perspective. So yeah, absolutely. I think that's optimistic, but I think I'm also hopeful that unfortunately, with so many people in my profession having to look for jobs this year, that they'll come in with like maybe more of a fresh and more
Yeah,
candidate.
that's what I'm hoping as well. And because I think a lot of people have been impacted. It's not just your juniors, it's not just your ICs. You've got middle layers of management and global heads
Mhm.
of, and these are the people who can drive that change. I
Yeah.
think it just needs to be a collective that once the market starts picking up, we
Mhm.
don't forget what's happened, and
Yeah.
we don't just brush it to one side and go, you know what, let's
Yeah.
just get back to normal. Like, because the normal now it shouldn't exist, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
I wish it weren't so taboo, to be honest, for like people to just, in any profession, just to do interviews, like, apply at other companies just as like a test, or like to do like some market research. I mean, it's a bit unethical anyway, because
Oh,
you're
it's so unethical, but I've
leading
done it.
on, you're leading on the company that you're applying to, right?
Yeah.
They would never invest the time in you if you admitted, I'm just doing a bit of market research here. But it would definitely again help to see maybe where uh, how your recruitment process and your candidate experience, how it measures up to what's out there. Because again, you really do lose that perspective unless
You also
you're.
need to be strong-minded, not to look at the other company and go, actually, you know what, that is better than what I've got
Yeah,
now, and continue the process.
yeah. I mean, there's other ways to get that kind of intel. I mean, there's like domain specific talent acquisition meetups and stuff, and you can speak to your peers. Nobody's like nothing. None of this is like a closely guarded secret ever. So
No,
you can always
I
get
mean,
that.
otherwise we wouldn't be doing this podcast, right?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So the topic of this is employer branding. So employer branding I think it's become part of the talent acquisition function, maybe the last couple of years more so, where it's become kind of in this world. But just explain, what do you specifically mean when we say
Mhm.
employer branding?
Yeah, sure. I mean, little disclaimer first off, I'm not an employer branding expert, right? Bigger talent acquisition people teams do have experts. Some of them actually come from marketing or comms or branding backgrounds, and then kind of just apply those skills to talent acquisition.
Mhm.
I'm like coming at it from the inverse sort of perspective, right? Like a talent acquisition person who tries to learn about branding and communications and all of that, and apply it to that domain. So yeah, some of the things I'm going to say maybe don't ring 100% true to a branding specialist per se, but it's just based on my experience trying to learn it the other way around. And I think this is actually the situation most talent acquisition people working in tech, right, in smaller, medium-sized companies, this is a situation they face. They don't necessarily have the background or the expertise in branding. So they're just and if they don't invest in it, though, nobody else will, right? And nobody else will kind of take the initiative to build an employer brand. So it's kind of I think what I'm gonna share is my perspective based on operating in that smaller, medium-sized company context where I was responsible for employer branding. But so what is it? I guess, branding products existed before. I think there were like dedicated and marketing teams for products or services. They existed before, I think, the talent acquisition function did. But I think it's still so I think it's still useful to apply sort of a similar definition and similar sort of principles. So really branding and marketing is about like raising awareness for a product, right? And increasing the likelihood that somebody's going to purchase it. Or if they don't purchase it, at least make them like a net promoter or like a brand evangelist or something like that. So our product as talent acquisition people is essentially, it's like, it sounds a bit like transactional, but it's the jobs that we have on offer, right? And the purchase intent is like making a job application, and the final purchase is accepting a job offer. So if you think of it that way, your job is like really to NTA, it's about making the jobs, or like everything that comes with the job, like working in a certain environment on a certain product, make that more attractive. And like branding as well. It's not something, branding again for a product or marketing a product, it's not something you invest in just once and then put to the side, right? You got to really have like a regular drumbeat and like keep pushing the narrative and try to stay relevant really in people's minds, even if, and that again, it applies as much to talent acquisition as it does to marketing a product, in that not everybody's going to want to buy what you're selling immediately. So not everybody's looking for a job all the time. But if you've done the work to stay relevant and in people's minds, when that time comes around, they will be more aware of you, be bought in, and hopefully purchase it. So that's like a more conceptual definition. In practice, it means just like knowing what your values are as a company, like, and kind of communicating those, like what really makes you special, and that is usually the people that work there, the environment, the product. You can also push how the product is built through employer branding. And there's many mediums you can use. Like we talk about marketing channels all the time for products. Same applies for employer brand.
I think the employer branding aspect, I try to, like when I'm speaking to TAs myself and we're talking about it, I always just explain to them, we get the holiday adverts. So you might get the supermarket adverts. I always try to explain it to like that. Like, for example, here in the UK, obviously we have Tesco, Sainsbury's, Morrison's. They all fight each other for prime space, but it's not about the supermarket this time of year. It's about them going viral because they've made the best advert of the year, so everyone's talking about it. And that's it. Because then eventually in summer, when you're getting your barbecue food, you go to the one that you remember the most. And I know we're not selling food, don't get me wrong. We're selling obviously opportunities and the organization and what it's like to work there. But it's the same thing. You're absolutely right. It's not a one size fits all. It's not a one and done. It's constant improvement, iterations, failures, trying again,
Yep.
and then eventually something starts snowballing, and
Mm.
you get a name for yourself, you get a brand, and then someone actually explained it to me that as your company expands, it eventually becomes like a teenager. That it takes a mind of its own. You cannot really control it as much anymore, but that's when you know you've got a brand. For good or
Yep.
bad, you've got a brand.
Mm.
Whatever it's going to be, it's based on what you've helped create. So we need to get to a point of employer branding. Is we need to create it with the right mindset, the right attitude from the beginning. So when it does become a stroppy teenager, it's
Mm-hmm.
not going to be it's not going to be going against us.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
why do you feel employer branding is important? So regardless of how big or small your company is,
Uh-huh.
why is it something that we should be paying attention to?
Um, hmm. I think there's a couple of aspects. So one, I'll start with like the very self-interested ones for
Yeah,
for talent acquisition people. One is that it's just fun. Like it gives you a bit of
that is
variety.
true.
I mean, right? I mean,
That
the
is
fun
true.
fun is important. I mean, and variety is important because it keeps you engaged. I think if your day is filled with, fairly repetitive tasks, like let's say sourcing, so sending out putting together prospect lists and sending out uh, pretty much the same or like slightly modified versions of the
You
same
don't do that. What are you
over and
talking
over.
about?
I mean, look, part of the job. I think you can still make that fun as well if you put some if you get creative with it. But
Put some
um,
music on.
yeah, exactly. Get some tea.
Yeah,
Yeah, so this employer branding gives you some variety, right? It like forces you
yeah,
to be and learn about being a copywriter or like a designer or like a comms specialist and collaborate with experts in those fields. So yeah, it just kind of I think if you're running a talent acquisition team, for example, I think that's a little bit of a tip, right? That if you have, I don't know, a couple of folks on the team, make sure that employer branding is actually a shared responsibility, so that people don't get too bogged down by whatever their otherwise their speciality is. Um, and then, yeah, another self-interested justification or like, the reason to invest in employer branding is it makes your job easier. So if you're being assessed, um, and in terms of like how many people do you hire and how fast, which honestly, that's that's really, I think, what most like stakeholders, like hiring managers, leadership, that's what they're looking at most closely, especially if it's a high
yeah,
pressure environment, like where there's a lot of hires to be made in a short time. Um, you're that will all become so much easier if you have a distinctive and well well thought out and well developed employer brand. So the reason for that is you essentially, if you have a well known or like a reasonably well known employer brand, you're going to get more like pre-qualified candidates at the top of your funnel, right? The more people already know about you as an employer, the more they're kind of like intrigued by what they've heard, the more it fits their values. It's more likely they're gonna apply when they're looking without
yeah,
you needing to prompt them by spending a ton on investing a ton of time in direct sourcing, like direct outreach, or posting job ads. And yeah, that's, I think, why it's really the most important. I mean, I've faced this before, like came into a company that didn't have a well-known product, first of all. That really, if that's often the case in B2B companies, by the way. The average person on the street, job seeker on the street, is just not going to have any pre-existing knowledge of what you do, or care much about what you do. And yeah, it was really, I could see it. The situation was that we had to do a ton of direct sourcing when we did post jobs. Like if you looked at the sources, almost none were through directly people coming directly onto the website, the careers page. It was all like just clicking through from external platforms, where we were posting the jobs.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a good way actually to measure like the effectiveness or like the successes of your employer brand is look at those sources. And so yeah, I was in that situation because yeah, if nobody's coming directly to your website, that shows okay, nobody's
Someone's
aware
finding
of
you for a reason. Yeah. I mean, you're not
yeah,
on people's radars. You're there on platforms because they're actively looking for a job, but they're not
yeah,
proactively thinking, hey, I'd like to work there.
yeah, exactly. So we had to really, I mean, this was one, I think it was already kind of floating out there as an idea when I joined, like, maybe employer branding could help us solve this problem because, it was, I mean, every talent acquisition person knows this, right? Like, yeah, direct outreach is great, but it's like a low return on investment, and the candidates you get through that are notoriously difficult to manage because they, a lot of the time they're not active job seekers. You need to do that qualification and selling, and that all takes time, and the like chances of failure, i.e. them like just dropping out or being like, you know what, actually I'm just going to stay where I am, they're much higher, the chances that that's going to happen with those kinds of candidates. Whereas a candidate that's heard about you at an event or read a piece of content that you've put out there, they are essentially pre-qualified, and you're going to have a lot less. You're going to have to do a lot less like selling, and they will be more engaged as candidates. It makes everything easier. Like you can then spend less time on this selling. They're probably like just generally less slippery, right? Like easier to set things up with. And yeah, that's I think the last like self-interested argument for recruiters. And then one like less self-interested one, why it's important is there's kind of like a knock-on effect. If you've gone through the effort of like articulating your values and like showcasing your work and your environment through all those employer branding channels, it kind of like reinforces them internally as well, and it holds people a little bit accountable. And in if you've put a lot of thought into them and they're whatever values that people are proud of, the people that you already work with are proud of, it will it will lead to more pride in the work, and like will
The
make people.
retention rate from the team members that are there.
Yeah, I think so because it just shows like it's like the next level of intent, right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, you can profess your values and your what you want to represent internally, but it really like, it's another level of accountability and pride, like to talk about it externally. And again, not just talk about it once, like on a careers page, talk about it, kind of reinforce it over and over again. I think that can have an effect internally as well, just that everybody's constantly sort of like reminded, okay, yeah, this is what we're about. This is, why it's a great place to work.
Who we are. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So from the internal perspective, from the individual perspective, you diversify your days. It makes it more creative. You get a little bit more flexibility in certain tasks.
Yeah.
From a business perspective, we increase the retention rate, but naturally it also increases the opportunity of getting better qualified candidates at the top of the funnel and makes it easier to close throughout that process. And then hopefully leading to a better return on investment on the tools that you're using. And especially in something like in the current market where, maybe new tool sign-offs, new platforms, agencies, RPO systems, whatever. It's each euro that's being spent is being scrutinized. So you need to make sure that if you are, and in this essence, on a budget and you want to do employer branding, then you need to be maximizing as much as possible. So before we get into kind of methods, which I know you've got quite a few to share, so I'm excited to kind of get to that point, but we need to identify where we're going, right? So we need to know what the goal is. We know why we should be doing employer branding, but there's no point in just doing employer branding, because eventually you're going to fall, you might forget ideas, you might not know where to go, it might get a little bit confusing to people who are actually reading the content or seeing you online or offline. So how can you actually articulate clearly as a collective team what the end goal for employer branding should be?
Yeah, I think, I mean, you could get really like practical about it and just say, okay, we want to increase this number. We want to increase like the direct applications, qualified direct applications by this amount, or we want to reduce our reliance on whatever, the direct outreach, candidates coming in through direct outreach by a certain amount. So that's one end goal, and I think it's kind of a worthy one. And to be honest, it's the easiest one to use if you're trying to get buy-in from leadership or from hiring managers or from like an internal marketing team, because it's like, it has just the most tangible like value. Like it's hard to argue against doing something or investing in something.
If you've got a return on investment value behind it.
Exactly. And there's no hiring manager that's gonna, like, they can argue with like, or they can argue how much they correlate, maybe, but there's ways you can argue against that. But they can argue that, oh, we don't want to decrease our time to hire, or we don't want to increase our the number of qualified candidates at the top of our funnel. So that's one way to just, or to kind of like set the end goal. But I think, I mean, the reasons I mentioned before, right, are just as valid. If you're trying to motivate a team, employer brand, I mean, this is maybe a weak justification if you're talking to leadership or hiring managers. But if you're leading a talent acquisition team, giving folks that variety and allowing them to grow in ways like along career paths, maybe that they wouldn't be able to explore in a team that's a little bit more like rigid in terms of responsibilities and career paths. That's another reason to do it. And the last point also that I mentioned before, right? This accountability, like everything you talk about in your employer brand, those are things you're kind of signing up to live up to, right? If you're putting them out there, anybody that joins, it's kind of like sets a little bit of a standard. It's like, okay, this is now going to be the expectation, like, of people coming in, and we have to live it, essentially. I mean, it's easy to live up to if all you do is on your in your employer brand is talk about, I don't know, like benefits or fruit baskets. In that way, we are selling food in some ways, like Marks and Spencer's and Tesco.
I mean, the sooner we read fresh fruit from the job description, the better I think the world will be for everybody.
That's almost become a cliche now.
The standing joke. That one, and if you're in Berlin, Club Mate. We have Club Mate and we have fresh fruit.
Yeah, totally. That's easy to live up to, because what you got to do, you just got to get the delivery every week. But if you talk about like how you ship your products and like what the role of a product manager is and how that might be different from, and tell the story through a person doing that job, which is I think a key part of any employer brand is like just to tell stories and to use like you let people who actually work there use their voices, like not kind of put words in their mouth or
Makes it more authentic. It's not just you pushing out your
absolutely.
opinion from a marketing perspective or from a TA perspective. It's getting by, and it links back to that increase in retention. If I was to sit there and say how great the company is, they've helped me do this, they've helped me do that, I'm way less likely to leave in the immediate future because my name is now associated to that company on a YouTube account, on a LinkedIn account, on a blog or whatever. I know who does it really, really well. I don't know how it actually impacts their retention rate, if I'm honest. Maybe we'll have to try and ask them. But Delivery Hero do this really well. They get their blog. They frequently get people in the tech team to write very technical articles, put it on the blog, creates great SEO for them, but it also showcases the technical quality that other people could expect if they were to join. And they do that really, really well. And I always frequently see their articles, and the team are proud to share them. And everyone cheers for each other. Everyone shares kudos, all that sort of stuff. And it's good to see. But I think they've only been doing that recently. Maybe like this year, or maybe I'll check before this goes live. I'm gonna have to check now. So we've got we know the what is, we know the why we should be doing it. We've got some tangible way to express to more like the C-level. Look, we can do it because we can reduce time to hire, we can increase the return on investment on this, yada yada yada. Right? These are great, but then the really important thing that I think most people are itching to hear from you is how do we get going? What are we actually going to do around employer branding? And taking it from the perspective of I've got a very limited budget, because a lot of teams probably come from that perspective. Because if you've got a large budget, you've probably got someone purely dedicated to this. You've got a content writer, probably sit with the marketing team as well. So let's take it from small to mid-scale companies or people in enterprise companies that have a very specific scope. My budget is small, if nothing. What can I do to try and increase my brand or my organization's employer branding today?
That's kind of, again, the context I've had to operate in for most of my, at least Berlin based career. So I'm gonna go again, though, a little bit back to laying the foundation, because I think people really underestimate this. They make their lives more difficult, and they will face roadblocks so much sooner if they don't take care of these fundamentals. So I've already mentioned it. So really important is to get buy-in from your leadership team and your hiring manager, sure, but also the people you're going to rely on in-house. It makes sense for people to hesitate to invest in employer brand if you're relying 100% on external resources, like, I don't know, designers, videographers, copywriters, which a lot of teams do, because they're told upfront, no, we're not going to use internal marketing resources or internal design resources for employer brand. They're focused on.
Why would they be sharing that? Well, why would they be told that?
Why would they be told that? Because you haven't done the work to make it a priority to clearly articulate.
Okay.
This is why employer branding is important. There's two elements. Yeah, one is articulating why it's important, and kind of before you want to undertake bigger projects, you need to really kind of get that buy-in. And the second is you need to just plan in advance. I think a lot of people, a lot of TA people will just kind of take a scattershot approach to employer branding and look at it as let's get some huge wins just out of the way, and then a big the real the one I see all the time is people trying to revamp their careers page, right? Which is a huge project, to be fair. And if that's what you're coming to the table with, to a marketing team that has other things on the roadmap or other priorities, yeah, chances are you will be told no. And then you got to figure out another way to do it. You got to go to freelancers and
Just
whatever external.
curiosity, if you don't mind me saying then, if we've already identified that probably most people, if you're looking into employer branding the early stage, most people aren't probably finding your careers page anyway. So
Yeah.
why would you gravitate towards upgrading your careers page if people aren't going there in the first place? Surely
No,
you'd want to get more people into the funnel to organically find it, show that you've increased the traffic, to then go back and say, now let's ramp up.
totally agree with that.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think people are attracted to it because it's, in some ways, it seems like such a compact and like, you know, like this is our mission statement. Like, let's put everything out on the table there. And yeah, and I think it should to some extent do that, but I think it shouldn't, as you suggested, like it's not, you're not really spreading the word beyond people who are on the website already.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. You're neglecting other channels which might lead them to that, let's say, like, you know, shop window. So yeah, it's that. So when it comes to like actually getting the resources, getting the buy-in, try to like plan it a little bit more in advance and think of it as an ongoing effort, right? And so then you're less likely to like overwhelm the resources that you get. Again, the internal resources, which are, yeah, okay, technically, if you ask an accountant, they would say this still costs money because we pay those people. Like, but I guarantee you it's cheaper and the communication will be so much easier than if you're going externally. Plus, you're getting perspectives from people who actually work with you. That's like, you know, just in terms of concepts and the content, you're getting.
They know the style and the vibe of the company already.
Exactly. So yeah, that's really important. And if you do that, again, you're gonna be much better placed. Again, you get the buy-in from internal marketing people, resources essentially that you need to rely on, from leadership as well, to actually take time away from sourcing or, you know, all the stuff that to them seems like, well, that should be your job. No, like I want to see results now. I don't want to invest in something for an uncertain like result down the line, which a lot of people, that's how they see employer branding, by the way. Yeah. So you got to bring them on side essentially. And yeah, plan it like properly. Again, think of it as an ongoing effort, and then you're less likely to overwhelm the resources that you are given. Like, you know, I mean, we at Pitch, we used to do at the beginning of every year, like essentially, we had like a project roadmap for all of our initiatives, like, you know, around tooling, around employee or candidate experience, sourcing, but we had a specific calendar as well for employer branding. Part of that was like a content calendar, an events calendar, award submission calendar.
Glad you've just said that, because we use a content calendar. We implemented it, I think beginning of this year. So we were in April for us. So we do April to March. And that covers, I mean, the podcasts, blogs. It has who's the guest, what topic is. Then we have something for TikTok, Instagram, LinkedIn. It breaks it down. So we know what we're filming, when we're filming it, what needs to be edited, where in the pipeline it is, and what the audience is, or who the audience is intended it for. And that has been powerful, having that small adjustment. And again, that's coming from a team that's 5 people. So obviously our budgets are going to be small on the employer branding side.
Yeah. But like it also, yeah, I mean, people, I think, underestimate the value of just giving people a heads up. Like, you're a lot
organizing,
less likely to face resistance when somebody knows something's been sort of on the agenda or coming up for a while.
Absolutely.
Because, you know, they're juggling a lot of priorities. You know, you can get it on their roadmaps or sooner rather than later. And that allows you then to rely more on those internal resources and ultimately spend less than you would if you were constantly, kind of going external for whatever, a copywriter or a graphic designer or videographer.
So then, like I said, circling back to the question of what can we go and do, what key kind of methods or let's call it methods. You know what I mean? What kind of what has worked well for you, and maybe what hasn't worked?
Yeah. What's worked well? Honestly, content, a big one. And this is also, content's great because you get a lot of mileage out of it. When I say content, I mean specifically written content. I think video is great as well, by the way. But
because we're videoing now, and you feel bad saying it.
Yeah, no. Well, this is a podcast, isn't it? So
it's also videoed. It's doubled because it goes on YouTube as well. Yeah. So smart thinking.
Yeah. No, but it's just more. It's a little. I mean, so the reasons it's good is that it's very engaging. It's very obviously visual, and it's like it kind of really, it paints a picture and kind of gives you like a sense of somebody's personality more than maybe a piece of written content would. But written content, I think, is more easily shareable. I think a lot of people on social media don't click out of principle or out of time. Will not click videos and then just sit there and watch it. I think written content is more digestible at your own pace, as opposed to the pace of what a video, whichever it goes at. And yeah, you can. It's also easier to produce. Not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Written content,
yeah,
right? It can be very collaborative. It's not necessarily always the author who is the only one contributing to the person with the byline isn't the only person who's contributed to it. It goes out on many mediums. It's very easy to kind of like parlay it into different mediums in different formats. I mean, and one like more practical tip here is that, you can, you a lot of the content that I've produced, for example, at Pitch, or I've helped to produce, it was like stuff that already existed, but just was reformulated for like a blog piece. Like, for example, there were a ton of internal resources about our tech culture. Like how do we build this product? Like what's our shipping cadence? What are the tools and like sort of the libraries we use? Like obviously that's content people are going to really engage with, and will speak a lot to potential candidates because they're really interested. Wow. So you guys we use Clojure. It's like a fairly esoteric, like functional programming language. It's rarely used to make like, kind of more mass market, products like Pitch. It's a presentation software in a browser. So a lot of people are really interested. Okay, what framework specifically are you using? How do you,
how do you do it? Why did you choose it?
Yeah, so a lot of that content was there. So we repurposed a bunch of it, like took kind of the key takeaways from things like what are our engineering principles? How often do we ship? How do we plan? What some more kind of technical stuff about implementation. And we crafted like a bunch of different blog articles around that. And then this goes into repurposing. So how are you going to get the most mileage out of that? So you have a blog article, for example, about your engineering principles. Easy one and an easy win is get it out on social media, right? The best social platforms for employer branding. Generally, it's LinkedIn because people are on there, maybe looking around for jobs, but just more kind of to engage with kind of work or professional things. Hacker News for tech stuff. A lot of folks on there. We also had a couple of Slack channels that we would share that on. But like, there's some evergreen content, let's say, that will be interesting to all candidates in a specific domain. Put it on your job descriptions as well, like as part of a let's say boilerplate text at the top. So yeah, just really getting the most out of those things. I mean, it really always will depend on, and this, I should have said this before about the foundations of employer branding and how to like maximize your chance of getting the resources and building a successful or an effective employer brand. And that is like know your target audience, like who specifically. And I mean, a really simple way to do this is just look at your hiring plan for a year or your likely hiring plan, and then just kind of look at the proportions, like of like, okay, what do we actually want to do? How many technical folks versus design folks versus sales folks, whatever, are we aiming to hire? And that should kind of set the agenda for the employer brand, specifically when it comes to content. Another
just to sorry, jump in. So if you're intending to hire, say, more salespeople, you would purposely gear your content towards what the salespeople want to see. What are they going to be most interested in?
Yeah, absolutely. And that doesn't always have to, I mean, like, so I've even had, especially sales folks are like obviously very active. They're very, extroverted, but also very good at building and selling themselves, like building their own brand and selling themselves.
Yeah.
And I've seen or I've worked with sales folks who would publish, just self-initiated, like publish a piece of content, like, these are my thoughts on a particular tool or a particular method of sales. And you could even use that as a quick win. Like, hey, can we repurpose this or post it like as is, just repost it on our channels?
Also, you would contact them and ask them.
Yeah, I mean, I work with them, so it's not like I'm coming out.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I thought you was referring to other people who maybe you were trying to target.
No.
Okay, got it.
No, I'm talking about like coworkers who are publishing content for whatever, just to knowledge share out there in the world, or for.
So you would ask them, so it's still there, because I think there's somewhat of a fear I do see with this about who owns the content. And I do see it a few times, especially when I do obviously, we do blogs, that one, you participated, we do the podcast. And then when I'm speaking to some of the guests, they're like, okay, I want it in my name. I don't want it to be my name at this company, just in case they try to either take it off, they try to take ownership of it. It hasn't happened in terms of that. No one's ever emailed me saying, take this down. But I can. Well, maybe my audience isn't big enough yet. one thing why it's in my head, and this works really well, that I've seen it a few times now. I'm trying it ourselves as well, and it's on the topic of written content. So by the way, I fully agree with the written content, repurposing it. It took us a little bit of time to get it. We now have a process. It's called the 5-to-1. So every one piece of written article content produces 5 external contents, and you can like snip it down. You can do a video, whatever, right? It's
tweet series, or whatever. Yeah,
exactly, right. But our blog itself is obviously driven by my LinkedIn, the team's LinkedIn, and we have a Medium account. But there's a collection of blogs that other people would write about, saying these are the top 5 blogs to read in ... Now, there's a tool that you can download on Google, a plugin which basically checks dead links. So you can go to these lists in your field and you can see which ones are no longer relevant. So especially it works really good for podcasts as well, because a lot of podcasts just fizzle out. And you can see which are dead links. Those that are, you can message the person who operates the site and say, hey, notice this one's a dead link. Can you replace it with our one? Here's our link. And because they don't want to be seen as somebody who's producing crap content themselves as dead links, most people just go, yeah, all right. So I know it's a bit of a long-winded one, but it's a really, if you make it happen, I've seen some podcasts do it. It's a really simple way to then you can then repurpose that and say we've been featured on this. It's a bit of a
I love it.
shady way of doing it, but
No,
it's a curious way.
clever hack. Yeah. I've never
There you
thought
go.
of it. I mean, SEO and like, getting backlinks and having associations with like more whatever platforms, publishers. That's also a part of employer branding, of course. So I've never thought of that actually. But for any, I guess it's SEO, content marketing kind of go hand in hand. It's a great. I never heard of that technique. What's the tool, by the way? The dead link.
I'll have to give me a second.
Yeah.
Let me. I'm not actually on Google at the moment. I'm on Edge. Microsoft Edge. I'm gonna have to load it now.
What is this? 1998.
Hey! Don't do it. It's actually called Check My Links.
Okay,
a Google plugin.
Cool.
So Check My Links, and then when you deploy it onto a site, it'll run it, and it'll literally say if it highlights it green, it's good. If it highlights it in red, it's a dead link. But there you go. Take that way with you.
Cool.
And anyone who's listening, everyone now steal my idea. I'm joking.
You can cut this. Yeah.
It's there to be shared. It's all good. So outside of written content, Eden's dodgy backdoor SEO link. What else would you say is a really strong employer branding technique that we can employ?
Yeah. I think purely for word of mouth, there's some limitations to this strategy, but and I understand why this kind of like fell by the wayside with COVID and lockdowns and social distancing in the past couple of years. But events, again, if you're operating in this context, small, medium-sized company, limited resources, they are a great way to actually build your employer brand. Again, you got to do it like purposefully. Don't just reach out to any and all event organizers. Think about who do we actually want to speak to, which communities, like, and again, that's depending on your hiring goals. So you need to kind of build up a list, essentially, or what you should do is build up a list of, okay, these are some meetup groups in, let's say you're hiring, I don't know, backend developers. Yeah, Clojure developers. Yeah. I mean, luckily for Clojure, this is a super simple exercise because there's literally only like 2 Clojure events per year.
That's why I said
Clojure events. I mean, there's a lot of groups and
community is small. Yeah. Let's say that one.
Yeah. But yeah, for something like I don't know, Python developers or Ruby developers, there's quite a lot more selection there. Try to focus in on the ones that seem to have the most active membership or the biggest number of members, or where you can watch some videos on YouTube of what's been sort of presented in the past. You can get a sense of like, okay, this is people clearly attend this because it's useful, and it's clearly the people who attend are deeply embedded in this community and care a lot about it. So hosting events. I mean, what the advantage is in terms of employer brand is just purely the association of your company with a certain community. So by donating your office
borrowed
space,
or borrowed. What's the phrase?
Valor?
No, I forgot the word now. It's escaped me. It's going to come into my head. Literally, I'll be saying it in the middle of the night and I have to text you then. Carry on. It's cool. It's going to bug me.
Shine, you could say. Yeah.
Borrowed authority. There we go.
Boom.
There we go.
Yeah.
Sorry, carry on.
So and you get that, but also sometimes you got to ask for it. But we used to host at one company I worked. This was a big part of our employer branding strategy, was like hosting events for specific domains, focused on specific domains or kind of groups of people. Yeah, we would always request, hey, you're in our office. Do you mind if we? There's a fine line here. You can push it too hard, but you can ask nicely. Can we just give, like, us being the talent acquisition or people team? Can we just give like a really brief intro and just like tell people what we do and why we're excited to host it? And most people, again, meetup groups are cooler about this because they're generally self-organized and informal than, like, I don't know, a bigger, more formal event. And yeah, they're always happy to let you do that. And that can have like really this multiplier effect. Like people, yeah, okay, there's the people who are there in the moment, who are now suddenly aware of what you do and what tools you use and whatever that you're hiring and what you're hiring for. But I've had it happen back then. It happened very frequently that from that, somebody else would, somebody who was attending would tell someone else and so forth. It really worked wonders. And so you get bonus points here, or it's more effective. Any event, for a meetup group, less formal, or like a bigger one where you have to pay for a conference ticket or whatever. It's more effective if somebody who you work with, so a colleague is actually giving a talk, ideally, related to the work they do at the company. Because then you just get a subject matter expert, you get more engagement from the audience. And you get more out of it also if this again goes to repurposing. And again, if we're talking about do stuff on a budget, just squeeze every last drop out of whatever you're investing.
You can get pictures from it, you can post that and say we're at this event.
I mean, you don't have to be so like
you.
You want to do all of this stuff in like a tasteful way, right? Don't make it super obvious that or you don't want to give the impression that you were only hosting the event to get this piece of content out of it. Like, so don't just say, hey, we hosted some people, by the way, here are the jobs in that domain. Like, say, it was a great evening. This is what was discussed. These are some of the topics. Here's the links to the organizers, and here's the video recording of the session. And then, only then,
if you want to learn more about us, here's our lovely careers page.
Exactly. Because I think it can kind of backfire if you.
Absolutely. You can see through it.
Yeah, absolutely, and that can do more harm than good in the long run. This is something you can you can do fairly independently as a talent acquisition team. If you're trying to line up speakers, that's obviously more collaborative. I mean, I had the privilege of working in one company. It was Wooga, actually, where we had a full-time events manager, and we would work with her at the beginning of every year to talk through, okay, what communities are you trying to sort of engage with this year in terms of hiring? Where are we likely to find them in terms of geographic locations? And we would come up with a strategy which included, okay, which events should just the talent acquisition team attend? Which events can we kind of propose a speaker? And then we would put a call out internally. Hey, does anybody have a talk they've already done, or like a talk that they're interested in giving at this or that conference? And the incentive is like, I mean, at Wooga, it was like you get to travel to pretty exotic places. I mean, sometimes less exotic, like Cologne, but sometimes exotic, like San Francisco, right? And you get
anyone who's listening from Cologne, we apologize already.
I was comparing relative to San Francisco. It's less exotic.
Nice save. But no, I like that point because it gives more of a purpose to content. Right. And, meetups, written content, videos, whatever, right? It's a purpose. And I think content for content's sake is just a waste of time. There's so much noise already out there. Don't add to it. But if there's a purposely thought out piece of content that adds conversations, doesn't just regurgitate what's already there, and there's a reason that you're doing it, then go for it. But, just sharing a picture of the team and saying Happy Friday every Friday expecting different results isn't really going to do much for your branding other than saying, okay, on Friday you take pictures. I don't want to take pictures on a Friday. I'm probably not going to join. But there's so much that can be done. 1 hour isn't enough by any means, but we will stop it there. But I appreciate you taking the time and going through that. There's so much to unpack in this. Hopefully you can trial out the dead link thing. Let me know how it works. And the biggest takeaway for me is that beginning of the year, work out who are you going to be targeting the most, and then try and navigate groups around that. Because I think what a lot of people tend to do, they get a role in Intel and an external, and then they're thinking, where do they sit? Where do they sit? Go LinkedIn. Yeah, that's it. Whereas, you can pretty much guarantee, especially if you're an internal talent team, what's your stack? It's not going to drastically change. Okay, what are you typically hiring for? Then those are the groups you go and find. Just go and nurture them and go start embedding yourself in them in an authentic way.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for joining and really sharing your knowledge. It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, same here. Thank you for hosting, and great questions, great discussion. Hope it's useful for other people. I did a lot of time on fundamentals, but again, in my experience, people try to skip those, and then I think it just makes everything else much, much harder. So I think it's just worth highlighting those and spending a lot of time on those. So that people can.
You can't build a house with shitty foundations. That's what I got told.
Exactly.
But thank you.
Otherwise,
thank you so much for it.
All right.